atmosphere in college football. Arguably, or perhaps not, the loudest stadium, the highest stakes rivalry, home field winning streaks, staring down a team that has absolutely vexed them, a potential family feud and a bitter rivalry, and the two unluckiest teams in America squaring off. So many things on the biggest weekend of college football yet. Glad to have you with us on the College Game Day podcast. Reese Davis and Pete Thamel here. Pete, I'm anxious to dive in to Penn State, Oregon, into Alabama, Georgia, into LSU, Ole Miss, even taking a quick little gander at Ohio State, Washington. But as often happens in college football, news gets in the way. And a lot of it centers in the state of Oklahoma. First, the Heisman Trophy favorite, or at least he was, prior to the news of John Mateer's injury. The Oklahoma quarterback will be out for a while with an injury to his hand. We'll get to that. But the second longest tenured coach in college football, a man who really defined Oklahoma State football, Mike Gundy. His tenure comes to a close. The Cowboys pulling the plug on what had been a reeling program as they decide to make a change with a guy who really has elevated them to heights that they hadn't seen consistently. He was a great player there and their winningest coach. And now the Cowboys are going to try to move on without him for the rest of this season and into the future.
Yeah, and there's so much about Mike Gundy's ledger, Reese, that's impressive. And I think we need to start there, right? We need to start with what was accomplished, because I think of all the Mike Gundy numbers that really stand out to me, he finished there with 170 victories, and no other coach in school history is within 100 victories of Mike Gundy. So when you talk about longevity, difficulty of venue to win, he basically, like there is the mean of a program, what they are and who they are traditionally. And he outpaced it exponentially, reset it. And then as the world changed, and look, he had shortcomings, he failed to adopt to the world. Like Mike Gundy's career obituary, failure to evolve will be there. It wasn't that he was a bad coach. He did not stay up with the times. He was very vocal about not wanting to. And they eventually tried it was just too late. I mean, they had 10 new coaches this year. They had a whole new roster. The athletic director, Chad Weiberg, was, sort of saying, hey, we have an expensive roster last night. Well, their roster stinks. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's filled with bad players. It just was an avalanche of lack of preparedness on all levels, and starting with Gundy's unwillingness to evolve. And it's going to be a long season there and a long dig out. And they're going to try to market that program to that it can be what Gundy brought them to.
I think the thing, and Oklahoma State fans have a lot that they should thank Mike Gundy for. They came within an upset on a Friday night of playing for the national championship in the 2011 season. And Mike Gundy will argue until his final breath that they should have played in that championship game anyway. Great team there. He had great players, a couple of names that Justin Blackman, Des Bryant. There are many others, but those were two that jumped to mind. Brandon Whedon, coming back from baseball to play and lead Oklahoma State to great heights under the leadership of Mike Gundy. And you saw so many players, Mason Rudolph, so many players in the aftermath expressing their thanks to Mike Gundy, that they shouldn't speak ill of Mike Gundy. They should only praise Gundy and his mullet and everything he did, because of exactly what's going to happen. Oklahoma's going to win, because they always have. Oklahoma State's record in the Bedlam rivalry, 20-91 and 7 ties. Now, that is one thing on the field that Mike Gundy never quite got, because no one got beating Oklahoma consistently. But when Oklahoma moved on to the SEC, when they left Oklahoma State behind as lesser than, whether it was directly articulated that way, it was most certainly implied. You don't get to come with us. We don't care about you. We're going with Texas. And you know what? Oklahoma's right. They are a bigger brand than Oklahoma State. Doesn't mean Oklahoma State wasn't good. And it doesn't mean that they couldn't finish things by getting a little pound of flesh. And Oklahoma State won 2 of the last 3 in the rivalry. And on one of the more glorious nights for Oklahoma State football, Mike Gundy sent Lincoln Riley away. he sent Caleb Williams away, and he sent Oklahoma away with a big fat L in the Bedlam rivalry. And Oklahoma State fans should be grateful for everything, but they'll always have that night. I hope they play that game again because it's a fun game despite Oklahoma's dominance. But there's a little piece of me saying, you know, if I grew up bleeding cowboy orange, that would go, we're good. We're good. Go on, have your fun over there. We won 2 of the last 3, and we ruined things for you on your way out the door, and we'll let that set for a little while.
To me, Gundy's going to be remembered, Reese, as sort of the archetype of the smaller school foil. Like, what a better, you couldn't have crafted a better nemesis. Dan Jenkins couldn't have sat in his like best fever dream and come up with a character like Mike Gundy. He was completely beat to his own drum. He was completely unaffected by anything around him. He did exactly what he wanted. And he was a brilliant football coach. He hired great assistant coaches. His offenses were always on the cutting edge. His teams played hard. He was a high-end in-game strategist. I mean, everything about Mike Gundy, the coach, was the highest level. But he understood the Lee Corso-ism. It's the entertainment business, sweetheart. And Mike Gundy gave us some entertainment. He knew how to draw attention to a place where attention isn't inherent. Stillwater, Oklahoma is a wisp of a town. It's maybe 45 minutes from Oklahoma City, maybe if you wined and dined a little bit. And he made it at times one of the centers of the college football universe. Very, very impressive. And look, the same stubbornness that allowed him to lift that place up for 2 decades ultimately ended up being his downfall. Like a lot of these guys, it's Shakespearean, right? Your greatest strength becomes your greatest weakness. A lot of good on the ledger of Mike Gundy. Will be interesting to see where they go and how they do it. Tough guy to follow. Nobody's going to talk about it like following Nick or anything, but there are a lot of guys who at Alabama who won titles before Nick. There was nobody who accomplished much of significance nationally at Oklahoma State prior to Mike Gundy. So a very difficult standard to chase.
It's a really interesting concept about programs that have had trouble winning, as Oklahoma State has, when you find the right guy and then finding another guy, as opposed to a place, there have been exceptions, but, as I go back through the Rolodex, Dennis Franchione at Alabama wasn't eligible to compete for a title, but they may well have won one in 2002. Mike Shula didn't, shadowed by probation, but even Mike DuBose won the SEC. Gene Stallings won the national championship. Some of those programs find ways to find coaches who win. Other ones, like Oklahoma State, like we've talked about with Cignetti in Indiana, when you find the guy, sometimes there's a guy that has the secret sauce, and Gundy certainly did. I want to wrap Gundy on this one. You mentioned him finding coaches, and it was novel. So many head coaches go in to that and they think, okay, what does my contact list look like? Who has at least a secondary connection to me? I remember Mike telling me one time, I think it was when he hired Yursich. He hired a couple of guys from lower levels of ball, and who's back with him now or has been. He hired Yursich maybe from Shippensburg or someplace like that.
I believe it was, yes.
Yeah, and he was like, I started looking at the list of who was producing big numbers on offense, and then I went and watched the tape. Okay, I like this, and then he called the guy. And now they still had to fit. He didn't call him and say, hey, I watched your tape. I wanted to, I want to hire you. He watched it and said, okay, I like what he's doing. Let me see if I like him. And he's done that with defensive coordinators. He's done it with position coaches. He tried to salvage this last season with some pressure, I think, of hiring veteran guys and bringing back guys. Didn't work. And, that's an unfortunate thing. And it'll be interesting. His brother Cale said that Mike would coach again, and he was going with him. So that'll be a fascinating thing to see if he gets back into coaching. Now at Oklahoma, Pete, they've got their own issues right now. As we touch on this before we move in to talking about this huge weekend of college football. John Mateer, broken bone in his hand. What do we have there in terms of timeline and what Oklahoma expected versus what actually happened with the injury when when he first got banged up, because he still threw for 270 yards or whatever against Auburn, I think.
Yeah. I think he completed his last 11 passes with a broken hand. So here's where we are with Mateer, Reese. We are taping this on Wednesday morning. John Mateer is in Los Angeles, and he is headed to surgery this morning for a broken bone in his right throwing hand. He broke it in the first quarter against Auburn, and essentially went and played the entire game through the through the pain with it. I was told by sources last night the surgery is fairly straightforward, and he's expected to miss about a month. Hard to set a timeline before they do the surgery, but they went and sought out Dr. Stephen Shin, who's one of the country's leading hand and wrist surgeons. He's worked on Drew Brees, Steph Curry, and Mike Trout. So that's a pretty good ledger for Dr. Shin. So they're obviously taking this very seriously, sending him to the best person in the world, and we should see plenty of John Mateer. The good news for Oklahoma through this is they have a bye, and then they have Kent. And so that's going to give them some cushion. Mike Hawkins, who started 4 games for them last year, who's a highly regarded prospect out of the Dallas area, will become the starter again. It'll be an interesting test to see how he meshes in with Ben Arbuckle's system. But they have a little runway here, right? They got a couple weeks to get him ready in practice. Kent State is one of the worst teams in major college football. So they're going to have a little bit of time to get him adjusted and going. And then we'll kind of take the temperature of the week of Red River, see where John Mateer is. That's in about 3 weeks. And then see, moving forward from there, what his timeline is coming back.
I know nothing is bigger in the minds of Oklahoma fans than Texas, but there is a bigger picture here.
Yes.
And I'm not doctoring. If Mateer's ready to go, he's ready to go.
Yeah.
That's fine. If he's not ready to go, there's a bigger picture here for the Sooners to make sure that when he comes back,
you need your right hand if you're a quarterback. You need your right hand to be
that's the other thing, Pete, that I think makes it. You can say healed, but that's the one thing that I think even a doctor would tell you is unpredictable. When's it going to feel right? It can be healed, medically ready to go. When's it going to, feel normal for John and throwing the ball? When can he start throwing again? All of that. So wish him well. Can't wait to see him back on the field. He's electric, great to watch, and I'm sure the surgery will go well. And whenever he gets back, I'm sure he'll get that Sooner offense humming again. In the meantime, Hawkins, yet another guy in that whole quarterback issue of the greater Dallas area. Hawkins, highly regarded. Jackson Arnold, Mateer was the least regarded among the 3 coming out of high school. Now he becomes the biggest star, and Hawkins will have to fill in for him while he recovers from the surgery. We certainly wish him well. Pete and I will turn our attention to the games of the weekend when we continue on the College Game. Pete Thamel, huge weekend of games. Pete, let's start where we will be in Happy Valley, Oregon, and Penn State. Last week on College Game Day, we did a Venn diagram, 2 big circles, and we labeled the circles as tested and untested among some of the undefeated teams. I did get a kick out of on the X machine. Some people said, well, this team's undefeated and that team. It wasn't the intention to include all of them. So the intention was, here are some of them. Here are some who are tested. Here are some who are untested.
I did get a text, Reese, from a certain head coach with an undefeated team that diagram was used as motivation for their team heading into the game last week. So
good. That's okay.
People are watching.
Do we have a connection with the athletic director with that particular head coach or not?
I don't. I mean, I know the athletic director. I don't think you know who this is. I don't think I shared it with you.
Okay.
So
well, I got the other one. We got it from the Terps, I think. So you must have gotten it.
Yeah. No. It was okay. a little higher class of preseason projection than the Terps.
Who was it? Come on.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that it was Jed Fish.
Well, good. Well, you know what?
I mean, they got plenty of time to prove it this weekend. That game's flying under the radar. Yeah,
I've spent because we're going to do the film room on that. I've spent a pretty significant amount of time looking at Washington tape and Ohio State versus scrambling quarterbacks. We'll get to that. But my point was in the Venn diagram that in the untested circle, we had both Oregon and Penn State. Now, we should have had another circle just for them. It said really, 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 really untested, because their opponents are 1-14 against FBS competition. Not a single team that either team has played has a winning record overall, regardless of whether we're talking FCS teams or whatever. None of them. Nobody has a winning record. Now, in Oregon's defense, Oregon has played 2 Power 4 opponents. Yeah. And then they play their in-state rival, Oregon State, who used to be in the old Power 5. So it's not as if they've ducked anybody. And I'm not really even accusing Penn State of ducking anybody. They had a series canceled a few years ago with Virginia Tech that I think they were supposed to play, but they've had ample time to have found someone else to have tested themselves. But as I've looked at Penn State, watched their games coming in, Oregon's put the hammer down, gotten Dante Moore going and stuff. Penn State looks like an NFL team playing preseason games. Okay, we know we're going to win. We're good. Let's keep it vanilla. Let's make sure we're executing. Let's make sure we're seeing some stuff. Let's go. I'm expecting to see because you're untested, by the way, I'm not on here. I want to be clear because fans get very sensitive to these types of things. You can watch both of these teams play and tell that they're good. Mm-hmm. You also have the history of Penn State and a large number of its players that were really good last year. They're good. Yeah. They just haven't played anybody that's good yet. They're going to on Saturday. And I'm wondering if we see a really elevated version of Penn State at home, the wideout, and playing a team that they know if they don't play well, that can beat them, a team that did beat them in the Big Ten championship game last year.
Yeah, I feel better about the early body of work of Oregon than I do the early body of work of Penn State. Yeah. And I don't think that's some outrageous take. Now, how much of Penn State is intentional vanilla? How much of it is we know what we have and we're going to hold it back and let it rip? And how much of it has just been a little bit of malaise, a little bit of feeling themselves out? By no means has Penn State been bad. But like you didn't walk away from any of their games overwhelmed or with anything popping. Now, to me, and we have a big feature running this week on .com on Drew Aller, and I spent a bunch of time there in June with he and the coaching staff at Penn State. And the takeaway was, Andy Kotelnicki said it. He said, I think we can have the best offensive line in the country. All right. So Penn State's going to win this game on Saturday. They have to lean there and then work around that. Use the good young tight end, Luke Reynolds, use Khalil Dinkins, the veteran, and then get Singleton and Allen going, and then pick the spots with the receivers who will really find out if they have significantly upgraded or not on Saturday.
I think they have.
Okay.
I think they have. Not that they were bad last year. I think those two guys are really good.
Yes. So. And they needed that, right?
Meaning Kyron Hudson and Trevor Pena, just to make sure we get names in there.
Yes, exactly. So James Franklin said to me, Drew Aller has played well when the people have played well around him. There was a sense, like a responsibility that they needed to elevate everything. For a few years under Franklin, it was the offensive line that was lagging and everything was behind. Now that receiver position has been kind of the bugaboo. So it's a fascinating inflection point, right, Reese? When you look at Franklin's record against top 10 teams, when you look at the almost decade now Big Ten title drought, when you look at they haven't had a quarterback drafted in the first round since 1995. Kerry Collins. So there's all these things like this is a generational moment for Penn State, and it all starts Saturday, right? Like it was the preseason. That's how they played it. That's what it was. Nothing. They stayed healthy. That's probably the best thing that's happened to them the first month of the season. But everything is now. If Penn State is going to traverse what I call in the story the most difficult terrain in sports, from great to elite, they've been a great program. Double-digit wins. They won 13 games last year. They won 2 playoff games. They were a nose hair away from winning a third. But to go from great to elite is what they have to traverse, and that is hard, man. That is really, really hard. So it'll be fascinating because this is a young Duck team that almost like doesn't know what it doesn't know. And it's going to come in like Dan Lanning's going to come in loose. They're going to go on 4th down. They're going to play free, and it will be a fascinating contrast.
A lot of great games this weekend. Those are the headliners. Back to wrap up the television edition of the College Game Day podcast right after this. Razorbacks, the 2 unluckiest teams in America. Arkansas is 2 sort of inexplicable fumbles away from being undefeated. They were driving down to beat Ole Miss. They were going to win that game. They were driving down to beat Memphis. They were going to win that game. Lost them both. Notre Dame has lost 2 games on essentially the last play of the game. One of them was literally the last play against Miami, who some people have ranked number 1 in the country. And the other one was on a last gasp 4th down pass against Texas A&M with 13 seconds left. Notre Dame's lost 2. Now, we've talked about how some of these games, Penn State, Oregon, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, are not elimination games. This is an elimination game for Notre Dame. If Notre Dame loses to Arkansas, they're done in terms of college football playoff consideration, in my judgment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They need to get rolling and really run the table, right? Like the wins available for Notre Dame are not big enough for them to go in as a 3-loss team in my judgment right now. Again, there's a lot of variables there that can change, but
SC may be a big maybe a big win.
Maybe, but if that's their only win and they have 2 losses. And look, you lose your first 2 games perception wise. It's just a long way to go to get back in. So again, maybe Navy becomes a bigger game than it is right now on paper as they go on and win. But right now, yeah, Notre Dame needs to win, and this is a generational game for Arkansas. Like they're going to go into a cauldron. I'm sure Hog fans are annoyed that the game is at 11 o'clock local, right? Because it's a once a decade kind of moment in Fayetteville to have Notre Dame coming in, and I think this is going to be a close game. I think Notre Dame probably pulls away, but this will not be a blowout by any means. And Taylon Green is a fascinating guy to go against when your defense is a little bit sideways, and Notre Dame's trying to get that back in. I remember Marcus Freeman said this week he's not going to take over play calling because he doesn't think the play calling is the issue. But clearly their defense has dipped since Al Golden got there, and Taylon Green's a tough guy to get right against.
Yeah, Chris Ash taking over for Al Golden after Golden went to the NFL after doing such a great job a year ago. And Marcus said that there was a meeting among the defensive staff members and everybody pulling the same direction, or they were going to separate. If they separated, that's not good for anybody. So it's a crossroads game for Notre Dame for sure. We expect that Marcus Freeman will join us live on College Game Day Saturday morning, leading up to kickoff between the Fighting Irish and the Razorbacks. College Game Day podcast will continue on YouTube. We'll talk to many lives of Lane Kiffin, also make a few picks along the way. It's a great Saturday of college football coming up. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching the College Game Day podcast.
Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon. It's apparently National Cooking Day, Tony. Do you like to